Is going on, Kings fans? Welcome back to episode 3 of Forum Blues, powered by the Aletheo Network. As always, I'm Rudy Hodgson. He is Jordan McConney, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Los Angeles Kings. Jordan, first and foremost, now we got a little internet issues, but that's okay. Manage on the fly. How you doing, player?
Good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Took a second for you to come in, but we will roll with the punches.
Yeah,
Let's get straight into the thick of things, Jord. It's been a busy week in Kingsland, as it usually is. Big news out of Los Angeles. Unfortunately, Drew Doughty out after a freak collision. Considered month to month, 10 to 14 weeks is the projected timeline per the Los Angeles Kings. Collided with former LA King Tanner Pearson. It looked ugly. People were hoping that was just a clean break, no tendon damage. Unfortunately, looks like he's going to be out for a prolonged amount of time.
Yeah, it looked nasty. I tried to watch the video the first couple times. It was really hard to watch. It's like ankle fully bent in half towards himself, and yeah, it didn't look too good.
Yeah, it was not exactly the way the Kings envisioned the preseason starting at all, obviously. But those are the cards in which they've been dealt. We wish Drew Doughty nothing but the absolute best in his recovery. You know he's a warrior. He's going to want to come back as soon as possible, but you never really want to mess with ligaments, tendons, especially around your foot, your knee. It's just a complete disaster. So we wish Drew the best, but you kind of have to turn the page a little bit. Jim Hiller alluded to it in all the press he's done over the last couple of days. Someone's going to have to step up to the plate and be the Kings' first D pair. Talk to me a little bit about what you think that defensive outlook is going to look like for LA as October 10th, right around the corner.
Yeah, I mean, it completely jumbles the D pairs. As far as who I have at the 1D next to Mikey Anderson, I think you got to go with Jordan Spence. I think he's got that offensive upside, but he also has shown that he's able to play defense at an NHL level. I think he's deserved a shot to be up there in the top pair, and then you can put Gavrikov with Brant Clark, and then Edmondson down there with I don't know if you want to go like Burrows is probably our 7th D. You got Burrows, Anglin, or Jones down there. So what do you think it looks like? Who do you got pairing up there with Mikey Anderson?
I think the Kings are obviously in a very tough position, but it looks like they were pretty married to the idea of Edmondson being with Clark and Gavrikov being with Spence. I think if anyone does move up, it'll be Spence, and then Burrows will get slotted into that second pairing, I should say, with Gavrikov. Unfortunately, I only say that because I feel like Spence has more under his belt. He can be plugged in here or there, whereas Clark is still a little fresh. There seems like Jim Hiller really wanted to develop that relationship between him and Edmondson. Not to say that can't be broken up, but I do think that come night one of the regular season, I think it's more likely that Clark starts off the season with Edmondson in that bottom pairing. But I think minutes are not going to be scarce for the youngster. I think he's going to get quite a bit of playing time the first 5 games of the regular season until they get a real good measuring stick for where he's at this year. But
I think it can be more of a defense by committee thing. I mean, you're not going to have one guy taking and get rolled pretty evenly here going forward.
Yeah, I think one of the things about the Kings this year is they do have depth. I could definitely see a world where Burrows comes in and plays reasonable minutes. I just don't see it being Clark right away. I do think that they kind of have to let the kid simmer into what 2024-25 is going to look like for him. Of course, things change. Obviously, you get hit in the mouth with a Doughty injury, first game of preseason, you have to adjust. But I think Jim Hiller said it really well in 32 Thoughts with Elliot Friedman, that one person's detriment is another person's opportunity. And this is one of those opportunities for a young player in Ontario, or maybe as what would be considered a seventh defensive player, to step up and get some real reasonable time at the NHL level if the Kings don't automatically go looking for a right-handed defenseman. I think right now losing Matt Roy looks really, really big on LA.
Yeah, most definitely. I think that, our defense took a hit to begin with there, and losing Matt Roy, losing that, it's gonna be a bell that has to be answered, and we have a large group that can pick up the slack here. So we'll see how that goes.
On top of that, the Kings did have to move forward. They did have to continue with the preseason, as I said, October 10th is quickly coming, right around the corner, less than 2 weeks. The Kings actually had a very reasonable start to preseason, a very promising one, at least on my end. While they did lose their first game of preseason to Utah 3-2 in overtime, 2 days later they bounced back, beat the Vegas Golden Knights on the road, and then this past weekend they took down the Anaheim Ducks. That's always nice, 3-2 in the Empire Classic, in what really looked to be an establishment of that first line, which was Anze Kopitar, Alex Laferriere, and Adrian Kempe. Strong showing from those three. Yes, it's preseason, but it's nice to see those guys working well together already from the early onset.
Yeah, definitely. I was able to attend that game. It was nice to see that line in person. They looked very, very good together. Moved the puck well, skated well, and you love to see it from a guy like Anze Kopitar, who's coming in, to yet another season in his career, and first game of the preseason out there moving, and doesn't look a step behind, moving his feet, doesn't look slow, doesn't look like he's out of pace, and for him to be out there with Kempe and Laugh, and for them to account for almost all the points in that game was very good to see. Very very good things to look forward to from that line. And obviously you had other guys there, more of a AHL filled roster, down from that first line on the forward group, but it was a strong showing nonetheless.
It is nice to see the Kings establishing some chemistry early, as the Kings are starting to make some of those cuts or reassignments to their training camp roster. It does seem like the Kings kind of already have an idea of what opening night is going to look like. But again, coming back to Alex Laferriere, 2 goals in that Empire Classic against Anaheim. That took place at the Toyota Arena in Ontario. Of course, as a reminder, if you're listening to this, I'm sure you already know, no preseason games being played at Crypto.com Arena this year or the next. But back to the task at hand, Alex Laferriere, 2 goals. I mean, he was the star of training camp last year, cracked the roster, is able to make a name for himself, was able to make the opening night roster last season, obviously poised to be in that position again this year. What is it about Laferriere's game that works so well, in your opinion, with Anze Kopitar and Adrian Kempe? Because those three together, that's a level of chemistry and confidence that is, to me, very reminiscent of that first year that Alex Iafallo came up to the National and played with Kopitar, and there was that instant connection between those two that led to a little bit of magic in those years where the Kings were maybe not so fun to watch.
Yeah, I think Laferriere, I think what he does that helps him gel so well is he's in the right place. He's skating hard and he's got the speed, but he's never doing too much with or without the puck. He's not one of those guys that's going to stick handle too far in and get lost, or he doesn't have an option. He always has an outlet, and he is always available as a pass option. So I think him, having the speed to keep up, but when he doesn't have the puck is what helps him play with players like Kopitar and Kempe.
It does seem that for a role player like Leferrier to be so on top of the pace of first line matchups is a testament to the development that the Kings are having with their players in Ontario, because he looked so NHL game ready immediately. It was, to me, incredibly impressive what he was able to provide early. I know people are expecting a little more from him, but I think he's completely fine where he's at as long as he is what Kopitar and Kempe need him to be on that first line, which is finding soft areas on the ice, maybe finding ways to create offense out of nothing. And he does have a motor on him. He can move, and he's got a shot. So it's one of those things where he complements Ange's style of play so well, where Ange's just constantly scoping out, finding those areas where the puck could be going to. And Kempe is just a natural goal scorer. You put him anywhere, and he is a danger at any side of the ice. So Laugh really impresses me. I'm only expecting more from him this season. But for you, Jordan, when you look at Leferrier, kind of getting back to my original point, and how he's been able to develop, does that bring you a little bit of confidence with some of these guys in the bottom six that are making the jump from Ontario to the National and seem NHL game ready? And I'm really looking at Akil Thomas here. I'm looking at Alex Turcotte, who have some games under their belt, but they've already played at the pro level in Ontario, and now taking the next step is huge for them.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, the development system is something that has kind of scared you like throughout the years with our draft picks. I mean, you just go back to Velarde. I mean, he's obviously another injury riddled pick like Alex Turcotte. So it takes a little bit longer, but as the years have progressed and we watch a lot of minor league hockey, we really dive deep into what we have in the system and get excited about what's coming up. It's just the way we've always, watched the game. But I do think that the Kings development system has given us faith moving forward. You saw with Byfield, it looked a little scary at first. And, there might've not been a lot of faith in every Kings fan out there that he was going to live up to the hype, live up to the number 2 overall status. But, he, a couple stints up and down, I do think he was, rushed a little bit at some points and they sent him back down. But you have a good system down there in Ontario that's teaching these kids how to play the right way, how to play the game of hockey two-way, and defense and offense. That's Kings hockey, starts on the defensive end, and I think they're really ingraining that in the guys down there, and that's why we're seeing a lot of success in first Byfield and Leferrier, Turcotte and Akil Thomas next, Jordan Spence. So I do really like what I'm seeing from our development system.
And honestly, it's not just the NHL level. And I know that is the forefront. The point is for those guys to develop and be instant contributors in the National Hockey League. But you look, seasons past, Ontario Reign have been really fun to watch. Like, those teams are top to bottom, very deep. And the reason why I allude to that is because the Kings are starting to make those moves down to their AHL affiliate. Kings loaning quite a few players, and I want to talk about a few of them because I think very soon we could see a couple of them in Kings uniforms. And the first one that I'm alluding to is Atu Yamson. I think he's a project, really. I think maybe 1 to 2 years before he makes a debut. But I am so high on Yamson. I love the way he plays. I think that he can be an instant contributor when he does make his way to the NHL. You're pretty high on him as well. Why is that?
I like what I've seen from him. And in the league he was playing in before, I do think that he has, the frame and the skill. I think the skill is the biggest upside. And, you have a lot of young guys that, have all the upside in the world when it comes to the raw skill, the raw talent. But some guys that can just, never crack it at an NHL level to where they just kind of light up every league that they played in. And then they get to the NHL and it doesn't connect. It doesn't sync over to NHL hockey. But I'm excited about him. And this goes back to more like the Kings system and the Kings development team. I think they're, teaching kids how to play the right way to where you don't get too caught up in the skill set and the hands and the shot and the offensive mentality, because the guys that have it, it's there, it's going to develop. You really have to show them the two-way game first. And with Yamson, I think it's one of those guys where he's going to get his first taste of the Kings development system here, playing in the AHL this year. And I'm very excited to see what he does. And I know we talked about him quite a bit off the show, and there's just a lot to be excited about with the raw offensive talent there. So we'll see how that plays over to the AHL this year, and I'm excited. I'm excited to get a chance to watch him live. What do you got on him?
Well, I think you kind of said all the right things, and it kind of teed me up for the next guy that I wanted to toss to you about.
Yeah.
Francesco Pinelli.
Yeah, I was just about to say the same thing.
He is one of those players that could also be an instant contributor. Now, Yamson, like I said, is more of a project. It's going to take more time. He's a very young, 22 years of age. It's going to be his first year in the American. So you're not expecting anything right off the bat with him, but there are glimpses of promise. But you look at a guy like Pinelli, who took a step forward last year. I thought he had an impressive preseason, or training camp, I should say. And you were at TPSC for a couple of those sessions. What did you see from the youngster, and what did you see last year that you hope translates into this season?
Yeah, I mean, last year, I think we talked about not being too high and expectant of Yamson for his first AHL season. I think I was a little bit too expectant on Pinelli for his AHL year last year, which was his first one, because you look at the points he was putting up in the OHL with the Kitchener Rangers, and he was putting up, let's see what I got here, over a point per game his second year with them. And then his last year with them, he put up, let's see, we got 90 points in 60 games. So you get really excited when you see that type of offensive production from a young guy. So I was kind of expecting to see, just that skill out there, that wow factor. And last year, I don't think he really had it. I think there was a lot of growing pains. He's not the heaviest guy ever in the AHL, more mindless, hard through. But I did think he got his feet set. He played good hockey, and going into training camp this year, I was really excited to see him skate with a lot more confidence. He looked stronger on his skates. He looked like he felt more comfortable on the ice, and I think that's going to directly translate to a better offensive showing in Ontario this year.
Now, that is a great segue into the next question that I had for you. And I know this sounds like an interview with Jordan, the LA Kings analyst, but I am interested because you get to see them a little more than I do with you living in Los Angeles. But The Athletic ranked the LA Kings number 21 in the NHL pipeline rankings for 2024. Now, we're not too far removed from a couple years ago when the Kings were sitting in the top 5 in this same exact conversation, if not number 1 or 2. Someone will have to keep me honest on where the Kings sat. But you take a look at this list, and I think it's a little unfair, if I can be honest. This is a list with Quinton Byfield, Brant Clark, Liam Greentree, Alex Laferriere. Atu Yamson is mentioned. So is Jacob Dvorak, who we haven't spoken about at all. But he is a left-handed shot, desperately wishing he was a right-handed shot because he could have made a name for himself this year, given the circumstances. Where do you think the LA Kings pipeline truly sits? Because I feel like 21 is pretty low for the level of talent and promise that those names alone could bring to the National Hockey League.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that a lot of people look past it now because, a lot of people are seeing Byfield's in the NHL now. If some people might not, include him on their list. So if you don't really have that number one, potential superstar in the pipeline, I do think a lot of people tend to look past the entire farm system because of that. So I do think it's underrated. I do think there's a lot of guys in there that, we should be excited about, but it's overlooked because of, we don't have that wow factor in a one or a two. And we've had guys developing for a while. So you look at Byfield, who's taking a little longer than we've expected. Brant Clark, we've been talking about him for, it seems like, a very long time now. And it's only been a couple of years, but people get kind of bored of the same names, and when there's new names, more exciting names. I'm curious to see on that list where the Sharks are ranked, because I don't think their farm system is incredibly deep, but it's top heavy. So
Whoa,
that's kind of where I stand on lists like that.
that is a take. I think
Celebrini, Smith, Musty, and then what?
Well, I mean, listen,
But I think it's
sound-
great, but top heavy.
I would agree with you that it does
Sound like Homer's a
pretty
little
top
bit.
heavy. I Dad, you said exactly what I was going to say. You do, because I don't agree with you. Sound like quite a bit of a homer when you say that, because I think Anaheim and San Jose have some of the most exciting pipelines for years to come. The Pacific is going to be an absolute gauntlet. Like, it's in 3 to 5 years, the Pacific is going to look very similar to what it looked like in the early 2010s. And I only say that because, yes, it's a different game, and yes, the game is evolving, but imagine guys like Celebrini, guys like Smith, guys like, everyone that Anaheim has in the pipeline. It is going to be super scary. That's the one thing that concerns me about this Kings team, is it feels like the window that was opening in 2022 is slowly, but surely closing, because some of those contracts are going to age. Some of those young guys haven't really peaked through. Not to say that they won't, but development takes time. That's not anyone's fault. But the guys up in the Bay Area are going to be scary quickly. The guys right down to 5 are going to be scary quickly. So when you look at the Kings situation, is that an area for concern in a couple of years?
I do think it's scary. I think when you look at top end talent in the entire top half of the Anaheim roster is pretty much young talent. San Jose has those hot shots coming in, so I think it all has. I think the level of concern all has to do with the way our players age, and guys who are kind of not getting up there, but getting there, and guys like Kevin Fiala, who's like 27 or 28, Kempe, who's like 28 or 29, Dano, who's 31, Trevor Moore's 29, I think. So, you have those guys that are, not everyone is Drew Doughty, not everyone is Anze Kopitar, not everyone can play forever, at a top level. So I do think it's a bit concerning in the long run, definitely, for the LA Kings, as we look forward to the way the other teams are looking and how their outlook looks going forward as a team, and the guys that they have that are super young and already crazy talented.
Fortunately for us, that's tomorrow's problem. Today's problem is making the postseason and going as far as possible, which kind of leads me back to, preseason, right? What's happened has happened. The Kings roster is the Kings roster. Based on what you've seen these first couple games, do you see the roster changing much from those projections we made 2 weeks ago? Or do you think for the large part it's going to stay the same? Because there have been some people that impressed, and, there have been some kids that have come up and played some pretty good hockey. So based on what you've seen in training camp and preseason, where do you think the Kings' biggest change in the lineup is going to come from outside of the unfortunate injury of Drew Doughty?
Honestly, I don't really see much of a change in, we had pretty spot on predictions as it went, the line pairs that we saw in camp. But what I do think is going to be a little different is what our team looks like a quarter of the way into the season, halfway into the season, into that home stretch, when, there is fatigue. There are, hopefully not, but it's a long season. So other injuries, stuff like that. We have those young guys that made a showing in camp and really made a name for themselves, played solid hockey, and everyone noticed. Everyone noticed, Pinelli. Everyone noticed, different guys, like even the new draft pick in Jared Woolley, the defenseman. Everyone noticed those kids out there looking comfortable playing against, borderline NHL talent and some really strong NHL superstars. So I do think younger guys are going to get the chance further down the line, but I don't see much of a change in what our core lineup looks like, at least to start the season.
So then what is LA's biggest need when you look forward to a quarter of the season, or even as October 10th approaches? Like, what is LA's biggest need for you? I think it's secondary scoring. I feel like we're going to have enough scoring up top from Kempe. I think that Trevor Moore, I don't think that last season was an outlier for him. I think if he can consistently get the minutes that he got last year, I mean, even playing in a 1-3-1, I think he can still put up 25 to 30. You would like a similar number for Byfield. I think 20 is kind of the baseline that you want to see him at. But the secondary scoring for me is where LA is going to have to really find a solution, or at least some consistency, because Tanner Jeannot is not going to be that guy. Last season, he had 7. Maybe he can put up some similar numbers to when he was in his first year with Nashville, but even then, it's not his role. And then you look at LaFerriere, he had 12 last season. I think 15 would be great. That's got to be his baseline, right? So for you, is secondary scoring also the problem, or is there something else that kind of stands out?
For me, I'd probably start with secondary scoring too. That was the first thing I was going to say. It's just, we've always been a scoring by committee team, and we need that secondary scoring to really show up this year, especially with the loss of Drew Doughty. That's a lot of points that need to be made up. And I think asking the back end to make it up is quite a heavy task to put on the young kids back there who are the more offensive minded ones. So it has to come from, Warren Fogle, who put up, I think, 20 last year. We need the same thing from him. We need to replace all that scoring that we lost. We need to see Alex Turcotte and Akil Thomas, chip in a fair share of points. I'm not saying they need to, put up 50, 60 points. Obviously, that I don't think that's going to happen, but you need everyone to contribute. Aside from secondary scoring, obviously a big concern is goaltending. We need Darcy Kemper to have a solid season in order for us to make the playoffs. I think that is probably the second most important thing.
I'm glad you mentioned the goaltending, because yes, I would agree that the goaltending does need to at least be serviceable, be enough to win us games. If you can steal us a game here and there, perfect. But what I'm getting to, is I actually thought David Rittich looked pretty solid when he played against Anaheim. Now, granted, that was a preseason game, but not only does he look good with that amazing setup, and we were talking about the rarity of finding a good setup in LA Kings history, but he actually looked pretty sharp. And that's exactly what I want to see from Rittich, as it's kind of starting to look more and more likely that he's going to be the number 2 to Darcy Kemper. I don't want to really see a world where Darcy Kemper is playing more than 40 games this season. I would definitely like them to diversify. I would be comfortable with Rittich playing up to 30 games this season if he can play 500 hockey. What does it look like for you? What is realistic for Darcy Kemper this season? What is the expectation, the baseline for 35 and black? Because I think that he is. Oh, this is tough. I don't think he's the guy that's going to win you 16 games come April. I hate to really put it that way. That sounds really unfair. But he's not a game breaker. You know what I mean? He's not a game stealer. The team in front of him in Colorado was so well defensively, and they offensively up top, my goodness, doesn't even need to be mentioned. But the Kings don't have the offense that Colorado had. And the Kings backline is obviously already out and about. So what is the expectation for Kemper? Like, what's the honest, realistic expectation for Darcy Kemper?
I think he just needs to have, a decent season. Like you said, I think I don't think we're going to have, obviously he's our number 1. I think partly because of, what we're paying him and, the experience he does have. But I think he just needs to have a decent year. I do like the idea of Rittich kind of playing more than what a traditional backup would play, because he did show us last year that he is capable of coming in and just giving the Kings a chance to win.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all Darcy Kemper has to do this year is give the Kings a chance to win. He's, like you said, he's not a superstar. He's not going to steal, half the games for you, but he just has to go out there and play solid hockey. And I do hope and expect to see that from him this year.
We're not going to jump too ahead because the Kings do play tonight, play against the Anaheim Ducks this time at the Pond, the Honda Center. Not sure if they call it the Pond anymore, but I still call it the Pond. That game will be on Bally or ESPN Plus if you're out of market. So me. As you kind of wrap up preseason here, 3 more games for LA, the roster is wearing thinner and thinner and thinner. So what is the balance? Who, what out of the remaining guys in the lineup, who are you more excited to see? I think for me, it's going to be Sammy. I love watching him play. Would love to see him get more time. And on the defensive end, I think now would be the best time for Kyle Burroughs to step forward and play some meaningful minutes. Like maybe pair him up with Mikey Anderson. See what that looks like. See if there's something there. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's, now's the time for them to really shuffle those D pairs around and see what works. And if it's not the D pairs that we start the season with, it's options. Mm-hmm. It's good to have options moving down the stretch in this hockey season here, because there's so much wear and tear that goes on throughout a season. And it's now is the time, if ever, to really see what works and what doesn't. So on that D pair, I do like the idea of, moving Burroughs up and around that lineup just to see, who he plays well with and who he doesn't. So we have options moving down the stretch. Hoping to see, Copley in there, getting some minutes and trying to see where he's at. Aside from that, as far as the forwards go, talking about Sammy Fagemo, watching him in the Empire Classic over there in Ontario, they did use him on the power play again, and he was out there. It was with Kopitar and Brant Clark, maybe Kempe. I think it was might have been a 4-on-3. It might have been Kempe, Laferriere, Kopitar, and Fagemo, and they just put him on his strong side and set him up for one-timers, and it looked really good. And that's where I wanted to see him, and that's where I hope to see more of him. And I want him to prove to the Kings that that can be something to use in the season, and get him a chance to play some more minutes.
After the Kings wrap up with Anaheim tonight at 7:30 p.m. Pacific, the Kings head to Quebec City for a game against Boston on October 3rd. Then 2 days later, they'll take on the defending Stanley Cup champions, the Florida Panthers, at that Videotron Center in Quebec. Jordan, the only reason why I brought up these 2 games is because I think it's really interesting. The Kings have a history of playing in locations that end up being NHL markets, or have been NHL markets. And it started since the 90s when the Kings signed Wayne, or in the 80s, I should say, when the Kings signed Wayne Gretzky, and they toured around all these Sun Belt cities that didn't have an NHL franchise, like the Floridas and the Tampa Bays and the Arizonas and the Dallases, Point being, Kings used to have Frozen Fury in Utah. Utah got an NHL team. Kings used to do Frozen Fury in Vegas. Vegas got an NHL team. I don't think that there is a direct correlation to NHL coming back to Quebec City, but it would be really, really cool. And the Kings being pioneers in that sort of conversation of reigniting markets or establishing them, it's kind of cool that there's going to be NHL hockey being played in Quebec after they've been yearning for hockey after they lost the Nordiques. So how cool is it the Kings traveling once again during preseason to play preseason games in these markets that don't have NHL hockey? It's good for the game. It's good for the growth. And more importantly, it's great for growing the Kings brand.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's exciting for, those people that in those areas that are hockey fans, and then you talked about growing the game. That's how you get more engagement and a bigger fan base. You play in different places that don't really get to see NHL hockey, and it's gonna have a really good effect moving forward. You look at the teams that are going there. You have really strong teams in Boston and the defending champions in the Florida Panthers. So there's definitely a draw there, and like you said, looking back at the history, maybe they're using these games to test the markets
Yeah.
and kind of test to see where they are in those areas. And that's exciting for the game moving forward, because that means hockey in more places, which means more network, more popularity for the game, which is what we want to see.
What market would you like to see the Kings play a preseason game in next? I have a couple that come to mind, but off the top of your head, and I know I'm throwing a little bit of a curveball at you, so don't feel inclined to answer right away. I can go with mine first. But what markets stand out to you as markets that don't have NHL teams that you would potentially like to see the Kings or the NHL explore in the future?
This is definitely kind of like a random take, especially, I mean, maybe just because I'm from the States and it's happened before, but maybe it's just because of the uniforms. But Atlanta again would be pretty cool to see, I think, in just my opinion. I don't think a lot of people would agree with that and want to see hockey there or think it would survive ever again. But I think it would be cool to see hockey in Atlanta again. Off the top of my head, I really don't have any other ideas, so I'm curious to see what you think about this.
I'm thinking of three. Okay. One of them because I'm a sellout, and two of them because I do think it would work. To me, it's a travesty that Wisconsin does not have an NHL team. I think that the Admirals are fantastic, but I really do think that there would be a rallying point with Milwaukee having an NHL team. I think it'd be awesome for the NHL to move to Wisconsin in some capacity. I think some people would argue maybe Milwaukee, is too small of a market, but Wisconsin loves their hockey, and there is a lot of hockey being played there. And I could definitely see a world where Milwaukee would nurture the hell out of that team. The other two, one just kind of makes sense. Houston. I'm surprised that Houston hasn't done more of a push, especially with it being the fourth largest city in the United States. And the last one, because I'm a sellout and because I do have a soft spot, I'm probably the only Kings fan that has a soft spot for Ohio, is Cincinnati. I mean, their MLS team is working really well. There's obviously an affinity there for the Reds. Their downtown is super, super nice. I love that little community. I think an NHL team in Cincinnati would work immediately. But any of those three kind of jump out at you? Any of those three kind of sound like an interesting idea?
I think, yeah, the one that you mentioned made the most sense in Houston that I didn't really think about, because you have an MLB team there that has a really hardcore fan base and a fan base we really don't like in the Houston Astros. But they're strong. They come in waves. They travel well, and they're very passionate. So I do think it's exactly what you look for when you talk about future fan bases for NHL franchises.
Okay, so no, that's a no for Cincinnati. Can you confirm that you're saying Cincinnati does not deserve?
I mean,
call it like you see
Cincinnati.
it.
You'd have it Cincinnati and not like Cleveland.
I don't think it will work in Cleveland.
No?
As much as I love the city of Cleveland, I don't think an NHL team would work in Cleveland. Now, they do have a super, super diehard fan base. They love their Guardians. They love their Browns. They love their Cavs. But I think that's an example of a market that would be so oversaturated if they got an NHL team. Like, the Monsters are perfect for that market because they are not hockey deprived, but you put in another major sports franchise there, and it's too small of a city. I hate to say they're too small, but the Cincinnati would work more in my eyes because they only have the MLS team and the baseball team.
Yeah, I mean, you have a lot of more experience, with that area than I do.
I do.
Being on that side of the United States. But so what do you think what's your opinions on the Columbus Blue Jackets franchise and like how their fan base is? Because I honestly have like no real idea outside of what you see on social media and stuff like that.
I mean, listen, you want to talk about a fan base that is there every night, every single night. It's the Columbus Blue Jackets. Like, they care about their little hockey team. You know what I mean? Like, they haven't had a whole lot of success, not a whole lot to root for, and they've been through so much these last couple of years. It doesn't even need to be said. They care about that team, and they nurture it, and they love it. That is a market that I have no problem rooting for if they make it to the postseason. And, I mean, us Kings fans, how could we not love Columbus? I mean, they gave us some of the best players in our franchise in those pivotal Stanley Cup runs. I mean, they gave us Gaborik, they gave us Jeff Carter. I mean, there is a soft spot for Columbus, and I do root for them, and there is a genuine buzz for hockey in Columbus. So that's why I think Cincinnati would work, because now you have an instant rival. And I think that's something that the NHL, I should say, kind of looks for, is like, okay, who can they compete against? Like, you look at Vegas, they instantly had a connection with the Kings because of the name Golden Knights. The Kings and the Golden Knights. It works. It too royal, like it was almost perfect. That's kind of what the NHL is kind of looking for, where Utah, I don't know what Utah's going to be named. I really don't. But if they are,
I think they're leaning towards the Yetis.
If they're the Yeti, instant rival there in Colorado, the Avs. So, it's there. Like that. Those are the things that they kind of look for. The one outlier is the Kraken. I'm not really sure who the Kraken. Maybe their big rival was supposed to be Vancouver. Like, that's probably what they wanted proximity wise. It's there. It's close, but I could see hockey working in Cincinnati. And I could also really see it in Wisconsin. I mean, Milwaukee, Chicago would be instant rivalry, the same way the Brewers and the Cubs are. So for those reasons, I think that those markets work. I think hockey would really thrive there. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll see, at least one of those come true in the next, 10 years here, but that's to be seen. We just kind of got a new franchise, kind of.
Yeah.
Sad to see the Coyotes go, but good for Utah.
They got to come back, right?
Good for Utah. I don't think so, man. I don't think they're going to have the right group over there. I mean, living in Arizona, the past 4 years myself before this, you had, some fan support, but the cities didn't support it whatsoever. The ownership group was,
bad,
terrible.
Call it like you see it. It was
terrible. Bad. It was just really sad to see, the slow, painful death of that team is really what it was, going from, not paying their bills in their arena to getting kicked out of the arena to playing in, it was a fantastic college arena, but playing in a college arena, and just to see that team slowly dwindle down. I'm glad those players get a happy and excited fan base now in Utah,
right?
Who's just, absolutely stoked to have hockey out there. But yeah, it was just living there and seeing it firsthand. It was really, really sad to see, a fan base lose their team like that.
We're going to open this can of worms because we got 20 minutes left, and I got to get this one little note out because I do have one surprise segment for you, which you probably saw at the bottom of our sheet, but we'll get to that in a minute. But you mentioned the Coyote situation. I can't help but also think about the Athletic situation in Oakland, right? Where it really puts things into perspective about, these sports teams, they mean something to people, and just taking them away because you can, or because you're refusing to make it work, to me is terrible business. And the way the Coyote situation was handled breaks my heart because, I mean, yes, there is a level of sadness and like kind of like a weird, you're happy it happened, but you're so sad it's leaving. Like you look at the videos of that last game at Mullet Arena, what a devastating sight. Like I could never picture a world without our LA Kings. Like, could you imagine a situation, especially in a market like Los Angeles? Like, I don't think it'll ever happen. I think the Kings are going to be around forever. At least they better be. They can't go anywhere until I'm dead. But what I'm trying to say is, like, could you imagine us going through something like that? A team that we care about, a franchise that we respect. Like, I'll never speak poorly of the Kings. I'll be critical within reason. But what's happened over the last couple seasons in Arizona and what's happened in Oakland to me is an absolute disaster. Like, it's the worst of sports. Where do you stand?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really heartbreaking. Like you said, there's fans and there's generations of fans. You have, my dad took me to my first Kings game when I was little, and like that, things like that will always mean something to people who fall in love with different sports because of that. And I don't think it's something that we as Kings fans and LA sports fans can ever really understand, because that's not even ever going to be a real like possibility. We can try to put ourselves in those shoes, but there's no shot we lose any of our teams. And the reason behind that is money. There's just so much money. You talk about, Shohei Ohtani's contract, for example. LA has seemingly endless money, and it's something that the major sports cities have. So we won't ever have to really face the idea of losing our team. And I think money is something that you talk about. You talk about sports being a business, right? I think, you get to those smaller fan bases with, greedy ownership groups, and ownership groups that are worried about their pockets more than they're worried about or care about team success. And team success and excitement is what really sells tickets. And when you don't invest in your team success, you're not going to succeed long term, and you're not going to be able to keep your team. And I think, as sad as it is to see, that's the reason why these cities are tragically losing their teams.
Sports at its root is about people. Sports are supposed to represent the best of humanity. Like freak of nature athletes that are gifted, that do fantastic things. It's the reason why there's no soap opera more compelling than live sports. So I think when you take the ethos, that emotional connection away from sports, you lose it entirely. It becomes a bottom line. It becomes a checkbook, and I think that is something that is being lost in translation in sports at every league, at every level, because there's a disconnect, and that's why one of the big things that I always preach about is, if you want to be a Kings fan, if you want to be a hockey fan, you need to immerse yourself in its history and its culture and the fan base. Like, you really need to feel a sliver of that before you get involved. Otherwise, you'll never really comprehend what it means to those people that will watch games when they win 20 games that season, or when they lose 3 years in a row to Edmonton. Like, they keep bringing us back. Like, you need to understand why that is so important. And I do think that hopefully in our lifetime, we will see owners take different approaches, or people hired to make the right decisions with their respective franchises. Like, for example, the Utah owner, I'm sure Tasso's talked about this in his show earlier, Good Morning Hockey. And if you're not listening to that, make sure you're tuning in for that. Great program. Shameless plug. The concessions for Utah, I'm not sure if you saw this, fan-friendly concession prices. You want to bring a family of four that can't afford to play hockey, but rather watch it. You want to bring them to games, make them accessible. $2 waters, $3 hot dogs, $3 nachos. Those things matter. Like those things are important. And if you don't have that, you're not gonna have the culture. Like that's how you establish a welcoming culture. I'm gonna get off my soapbox, but that's where I stand on all that. I don't know if you have anything to add there, brother, but an important thing to note as we wrap up this particular part of the show.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that, you know, that we really notice things like that. We've become really jaded living in, at least for me, living in LA, where, you know, you're used to a beer being $25 and you
Gotta pay
don't
for show, hey
kind of,
brother.
you
Somebody's
don't,
got to pay for show, hey.
yeah, you don't even like second guess it. But it's, it's like, it's weird because like, yeah, I mean, you can talk about this for a few minutes. Like living when I was in Arizona, the Diamondbacks games, even when they sucked before they really broke out this past year and beat the Dodgers, um, the tickets were still like relatively expensive, and they were a little bit better, but like then this team down the 5 freeway, the on the 57 is the Angels, and I could get into an Angels game for like $4 on some days. So it was like it was confusing as to like why do these mediocre teams have such, you know, varying prices for, you know, the same quality, very similar quality of the sport. And it really makes you wonder like, you know, who's in like the people in charge of that, and where their priorities lie when it comes to the sports team. So I do think Utah, being more inclusive in terms of price points and making it affordable, because they're trying to grow the game of hockey in a somewhat newer hockey area, and the only way you're going to do that is by getting new fans and reaching out to the younger fan base, and the younger fan base can't go to games if their family can't afford it. So I think it's great for the game.
And you know, tying this back to the NHL, I do think that the Kings have done a really good job with their grassroots and how they've grown the game locally. And one of the things that I always preach about when I think about how the Kings have grown the sport in their own particular market, I think of a video of Jim Fox during the Stanley Cup rally outside of the formerly known as Staples Center, where he was talking about what a Stanley Cup is going to mean to Los Angeles, what it's going to mean to that market, because that market cares about their team. They might not always come out in droves, but when the team is good, everybody comes out the woodwork, and they are Kings fans. But I always think to this video of Jim Fox where he says that he would always be asked by young kids if the Kings had ever won the Stanley Cup, and he would always have to tell them no. But after they won, like it was going to mean so much to him to be able to say, yes, they won the cup in 2012. Yes, because like kids want winners. Kids, like I said, athletes in sports, they're supposed to be the best of humanity, right? So I do think it's a testament to like how we like if you see this is the sports thing coming out, how the Kings make the effort to grow the sport locally. I mean, that's how you and I got into the game, right? Like playing street hockey, like we couldn't afford ice, and yet we were able to do enough to put ourselves in a position to be able to afford to play ice hockey, because it is a sport of privilege.
Absolutely. I do think it's, you know, it's a first world sport. It's a sport that you can't just, you know, go in your front yard and you know, play with your neighbors, because not a lot of people know about hockey, and it's just so expensive. And it's kudos to the Anaheim Ducks for what they did to grow the game, because I do think they started a lot of programs earlier and before the LA Kings, because you know they were a newer franchise. They came after us, but they had a lot of great programs out there. They opened a lot of hockey rinks that we played at growing up, all owned by the Anaheim Ducks. So I do think that, you know, I'm very grateful to Anaheim and what they did to grow the sport of hockey in Southern California. But you know, the Kings are doing it now. They have they have the Little Kings program that offers, I think it's like, you know, completely free set of gear to young kids. And I did play in, you know, one of the Kings programs when I first started skating too. And I think it might have been like the Learn to Skate program or something like that. But the teams have a big role in growing the game.
It is absolutely vital. And as a couple of Southern California locals, it is important. Jordan, I have appreciated this particular tangent that we went on. It is an important one. And I hope the people at home listening to this learned a thing or two, or maybe gained a new perspective on the business side of sports that'll alter the way you think just a little bit. But let's wrap up this episode with something a little bit more positive. A new segment that I am surprising you with. A couple minutes left on the show, so let's wrap it on something a little fun. I'm going to give you some stats. I'm going to give you maybe a potential storyline, and I want you to try to guess this random Los Angeles King. We're going to start with 3. Some of them, I mean, we go back. We've watched maybe too much Los Angeles Kings hockey. I would hope you get 2 of the 3. One of them might be a little tough. Are you up for the challenge?
Yeah, I'm excited. A little nervous. I mean, I'm not too good at these little guessing games here. Stats alone probably wouldn't help me, but give me a little bit of a story. I might be able to get, one.
All right.
So let's see.
Here's the first player. Okay. He only played 1 season with the Los Angeles Kings, 22 games, scored a goal and 4 assists. He is a 2-time Stanley Cup champion, a 3-time Stanley Cup finalist. He played for the team that the Kings beat in 2014, the New York Rangers. He scored the 2nd goal against Los Angeles in Game 1. We'll start there. Do you remember this former Los Angeles King? And obviously did not win the Stanley Cup with New York because they have yet to win a cup since 94.
He's a 2-time champ?
He's a 2-time champ.
2-time champ, 3-time finalist. Oh, man. 1 season with the Kings.
Actually, no.
One season with the Kings.
I apologize. 1 season with the Kings. I thought I was going to say 4-time Stanley Cup finalist.
Forward or defense?
Left wing. Lefty. So that's your first hint. Or that's your second hint, I guess. I'll give you one more hint. Hopefully you can get it with the last one.
I don't know if I'm going to get this one. This one's a little tough.
It's really not that tough. He's played everywhere.
Suitcase that is a 2-time champ and a 3-time finalist. All right, give me the last hint because I'm really, really blank right now.
Swedish.
Oh my God.
Raven Tassos, do you guys know?
No idea from either of us.
Oh, come on, guys.
I would love to add some. I'm very not well versed in LA Kings players, but I would love to
barely a Kings player.
Barely. But love to get some Jeopardy music right now. But
absolutely,
I know that'd be great.
Absolute
It might pass the time a little bit.
Speedster, Swedish speedster, 2-time Stanley Cup champion. I think I hear some commotion over there. I think did Tassos get it?
We're discussing it. He's
Rangers.
thinking right now.
They got 2 brains over there. I got half of one.
We got 1 over here. I am not helpful. Tassos is not knowing it.
All right, last hint.
All right.
He won his 2 Stanley Cups with the Pittsburgh Penguins in 15-16 and 16-17.
The guy I'm thinking of was ever a King. No, he wasn't a King.
So let's recap. Swedish winger, played for the Kings for a season, and is a 2-time Stanley Cup champion with the Pittsburgh Penguins, back-to-back champion, was on the 2014 Rangers team that we beat in the Stanley Cup final.
This is really painting Tassos that he doesn't know it. So,
guys, when I say the name, it's going to really piss you off. And we got 2 more.
I know it's going to piss me off.
We got 2 more of these. I thought this was the easy one.
Dude, I was going to say this. Did you start with the easy one and I'm just not going to get any of these?
Well, I think you would get the second one, Jordan. I'm not sure about the other guys, but I think you should get the second one.
Tassos threw out Patrick Hornquist.
Not Patrick Hornquist.
See, that was my idea, but he wasn't a King.
Not an LA King. When you guys are ready to give up, you let me know.
me 10 more seconds, bro. Hold on.
I'm going to give Jordan one more guess, and then I'll open it up to Raven and Tassos for one last guess. So Jordan gets the first guess.
No, I give up.
Fraud. Gentlemen?
We have no idea. I was going to search up Swedish players to just pick a list from, but
All
Gentlemen,
right.
the
what
random
is the answer?
Los Angeles King is Carl Hagelin.
Oh my God. I'm not even gonna start.
Speedster. That guy was fun to watch. He was actually a mutual friend of ours, Pedro De Leon. Absolute beauty. Shout out to Pedro. Used to love Carl Hagelin. Used to adore Carl Hagelin because he was so fast. But that is the first random LA King. Are you ready for the second?
That was a tough one to not get, but yeah, hit me.
This random Los Angeles Kings player played with the LA Kings from 2007 to 2011. He is from Slovakia. Played on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 NHL teams. So Slovakian LA Kings player from 07 to 2011. Start there.
Forward.
I haven't said that.
I think it's a forward.
Okay.
7 to 11. Hanzus?
It is Michael Hanzus. Very
that,
nice.
that was an easy one.
My next hint was going to be scored overtime winner against the Kings in the Western Conference Final. Do you remember that? Game 5, I believe it was. No, 6.
What year?
No. Game 5, 2014. I apologize.
What year was that?
2014. He was a part of the Chicago Blackhawks. Scored the Game 5 overtime winner against the Kings at the United Center.
Oh.
In what was an elimination game. The Kings could have won that series that night. They did not. But no problem. They would go on and do it in the 7th game. In case our Chicago Hockey Radio guys forgot who won the Stanley Cup in 2014. Let's not go any further. All right, here's the last one. This is a tough one. Okay.
I don't think I'm gonna get this one.
I hope you get it as a Kings lifer. Any older people in the audience would probably get it. This final random Los Angeles Kings player played 4 seasons with the LA Kings from 2000 to 2004. Okay. He is from Sherbrooke, PQ. Hello? Raven, what is PQ?
what?
Sherbrooke. I'm going to look this up. Sorry, guys.
Sherbrooke, PQ? Quebec?
I'm geographically
Is it
challenged.
Quebec?
Oh,
So.
is this Quebec?
Can tell you.
I would imagine
Sherbrooke,
Quebec.
Quebec.
Yeah.
It's not one of the 50
PQ.
states.
Oh, province of Quebec makes sense. All right, guys. Sorry, the American is showing. I almost said his name. I almost just said his name. 4 years with the LA Kings from Sherbrooke, PQ, so Quebec. And I'll even tell you he was drafted 96th overall in the 96 NHL draft. Silence has hit the podcast. For the first time ever, Jordan is at a loss for words, gentlemen.
Any help here? You guys got anything? Any ideas?
If they get this one, I'm quitting the show.
Can you
They're
say
cheating.
it again?
They're cheating though.
Okay.
It's not the same.
Yeah, they better not cheat.
I won't cheat.
Okay. 96th overall pick for the LA Kings in the 96 NHL entry draft. Played 4 years with LA from 2000 to 2004. And he's from Sherbrooke, Quebec. Some diehard Kings fan got it instantly with 96 overall. And if you did, DM me and I will personally give you a signed Adrian Kempe card or something. Because that is impressive.
I need like a significant moment if there is one, or like some stat
There
lines.
is a significant moment. That is my final hint for you. But I will say this. In his first season with the LA Kings, played 62 games with LA, 21 points, but he got sent down to the Lowell Lock Monsters of the American Hockey League. So he was up and down that first year, but then he consistently played. Oh, man, he played 5 seasons with LA. Don't think that's going to make a difference for you, but he played 5. Which I should have got because I remember him playing in 06.
What position was this player? Because I got nothing.
Center.
I had to search this one up, and I'm going to be real. I don't know who this is. So, yeah.
Hell yeah. I've done my job,
man.
The gatekeeper of
what was a significant moment? If someone in like listening has got this, good for you. I mean, maybe it's because I wasn't really like even alive when he was drafted, but what's the significant moment?
He scored the game-winning goal in the frenzy on Figueroa. So for those at home, I'm sure you know, the frenzy on Figueroa is the game that happened on April 18th, 2001. The Kings down 3-0 against the Detroit Red Wings, heading into the third, scored 3 goals late to force overtime against the 2001 Detroit Red Wings. Good God, that roster. This player scored the overtime winner in Game 4 of the frenzy on Figueroa. Who is this random LA King? I'm going to say the name is going to piss you off.
I'm going to know who this player is. I'm not going to be like our other half of the show.
I would absolutely hope you at least know the name.
Oh, man. All right. I'm ready to give up. Let's tell the listeners what or who the player is.
Jordan, this random Los Angeles King is Eric Belanger.
I have heard that name. I do know who that is.
Oh, no. Not a real Kings fan if you don't know who Eric Belanger is. He was like, I was, 2 months old? But I remember my dad thinking Eric Belanger was next up. He was like, you guys don't get it. Eric Belanger, yada, yada, yada. I vividly remember being a little kid running around in Bell, California, to a very scary man screaming, Eric Belanger is up next. But that is our final
great segment there.
Segment of the show. Random LA Kings player of the week. Next week, Jordan, I'm going to let you host this segment. You'll quiz me and the boys, our producers, on the random LA Kings of the week. Pick out 3 for me. I'll do my best to get them right. But I'm actually going to keep a counter too. I'm going to see how many you get right. So you only got 1 of 3. So we'll at the end of the season, we'll see who got the most.
Batting over 300. Let's go.
Okay. You got to start somewhere. Everyone at home listening, make sure you give us 5 stars on Spotify. Make sure you do all the sharing and liking and loving on Apple or wherever you get all your podcasts. I've been Rudy Hodgson. That's been Jordan McConney. Thank you, as always, for tuning in and talking a little bit of Kings hockey here on Forum Blues, powered by the Alethio Network. We'll be back next week, wrap up preseason talk as we get ready for the 2024-25 season. Take it easy, folks. We'll see you next time.